Hey there guys, thanks for joining me once again for another episode of Mortal Realms Monday. So as you may have noticed from the Mortal Realms magazine review this week, we didn't get any new models, and so I thought I would throw in a special for the Premium Kit 2, or Part 2. So this is the Sylvaneth Premium Kit, and this particular model here is the Drycha Hamadreth. You can find the magazine review for both this week's issue of Mortal Realms and the special issue for this premium kit up in the cards in the top right corner there, and I'll also post the links for those down in the description box below. But without further ado, let's get painting this little beauty. So to get started, I obviously primed this with just a straight grey primer. And I am now taking some Dryad bark and applying this to all the areas that are going to be obviously the wood effect. So that is everything except the honeycomb and the sort of the viney leafy branches that are coming off various parts of the model. You'll also notice with this model that I went ahead and pre-made a base for this, as I did have in mind the kind of base that I wanted to go for this model, so I went ahead and laid that down ready. I don't show in this video how to do the base. We are just focusing on the model itself. You'll also notice that the head is missing, as well as a small section just in front of the body, the sort of the front of the chest area, and the top area that covers the what looks like a glass dagger in the top of the thigh. I left those off so that I could get to the body, the area behind the head and the glass dagger without any issue. In hindsight, I think I may have left the honeycombs off. I can't remember if that was possible or not, but I do think that they came separate, as that would have been easier to get to some other areas, or I would have at least left the arms off. But it wasn't too difficult to get to those areas. So yeah, like I say, first of all, just a couple of thin coats of Dryad bark, and we can move on to the next step. Right, so once I have a nice even coat of the Dryad bark, I'm now taking a 50-50 mix of Dryad bark and Rakarth flesh, and just using a dry brush here, I'm just going to heavily dry brush this all over, picking up all the hard edges and the peaks and ridges and that of the wood. Now, dry brushing, as most of you may know, tends to leave a bit of a chalky effect. It's not the best effect on flat areas or areas that you want to have a smoother finish. However, with wood, I find it to have an excellent finish. The way that it picks those edges up, that it has that almost sort of broken effect, and it just finds every texture, every bit of texture that it would, which on wood it would. Shot for every time I said wood. Anyway, so yeah, the basically just dry brush this over all of the Dryad bark areas, and you thought I was going to say wood, but no, dry brush this over all of the Dryad bark areas, and that way it will give us a nice highlight before we do a wash over it. Now, I hope you guys have noticed, or if you've watched my previous videos, you may have noticed the camera angle is a little bit different, and I can also now include the palette. This is because I went ahead and bought a camera arm to mount my camera. So now it's nice and out of the way. I can paint nice big models, have the camera out, and just zoom in as much as I needed. So hopefully from this point onwards, in terms of camera quality, I'll be able to give you guys something a little bit better than what I have previously. Anyway, enough about that. Let's jump on ahead to once I have finished this dry brush, and we can check out what I did next. Okay, so next up I'm taking a nice large brush here. This is a size 6 round, but you can use any large brush or the Citadel shade brush or wash brush, anything like that. And I've just taken some Hamadreth Earthshade and applying this over the entire piece, again leaving out the honeycomb areas. And the reason for this is the Rakarth Flesh Dryad Bark mix goes on, but it's a little bit too bright, so I'm using this to not only shade in the recesses and give the model a little bit more depth, but also to tone down the Rakarth Flesh areas, highlights and stuff. You'll also notice that on the branches that are extending off of various parts of her body, I've gone ahead and just applied a coat of straight up Rakarth Flesh over that. That's just so that when it comes to applying the colour later on, that it's going over a paler colour rather than the grey. So obviously just a quick wash over this. There's nothing too much to go into details on, so I'll get on with this and we'll be back in just a minute, guys. Right, so once the Hamadreth Earthshade had dried, I'm now going in with a couple of coats of Avaland Sunset, and you'll notice that I am now using a new wet palette here. This is the wet palette from the Army Painter, and I'm planning on giving it a little bit of a review, but I do want to get some use out of it for a couple of weeks, and I'll try and make a review video on my opinions on the quality of this palette compared to the homemade one that I was using previous. But I will say at this point that so far I am enjoying using it, but I will try and do a full video on that for you guys, as I do want to start maybe doing some more review videos of various products. So if there is anything you guys would like to see me review, let me know down in the comments, and I'll see what I can start reviewing for you guys. But with that said, so obviously over all of the honeycomb areas now, so these are the bits on her back, the tops of her arms, her left thigh, and also her midsection, the sort of waist area that goes obviously all round the back. I also paint that in Avaland Sunset, although at this stage I did forget, and so it's something that I go back in a little later on and do that. But if you are painting along to this video, or looking, you know, for ideas and inspiration, then don't forget to paint that little part as well at this point. So we'll just jump on and be back in just a bit. And welcome back. So once I've got the a couple of nice coats of Avaland Sunset on, including getting it down into the those small holes that make up the honeycomb, I'm now taking a wash of Drycha Flesh Shade and just applying this over all of those honeycomb areas, making sure to concentrate it, you know, get a small pool in each of those honeycomb pieces, as well as around the edges where it meets the bark. So obviously this is done on all of the honeycomb areas, and once that's dried we'll come on back for the next stage. Okay, so whilst the Drycha Flesh Shade dries, or is mostly dry, I'm now taking some Ceramite White, and I'm applying this, as you can see, to the female body portion of the model here, also her head, just sort of the face section, obviously ignoring the branches that tail off what make up her hair, and also the dagger that is in her thigh. This is so that I can use a wash or a shade later on to give a little bit of colour to this. So yeah, the reason I use the ceramite white over some of the other whites is obviously it's a base paint, so it's a little bit thicker, but also out of the whites, to me it looks to be the purest white. The Corax white tends to have a very slight grey tinge to it, and the white scar is a little bit too thin to get a decent coverage with on, you know, just as a base white. So yeah, the ceramite white works best for me. So I'll go ahead and apply this, and then we can move on. Okay, so next up I take some Lorraine Forest, and I'm applying this over all of the branch areas here, and I'm thinning it slightly and bringing it back down onto the bark. But as the bark is a darker colour, it will give a nice bit of a blend. I don't want to apply this too thick, just enough to give that sort of green look to it, as I'll be applying other tones over the top of this later on. But as I said, this will be over all of the branch pieces with the leaves on the end, also the branches that make up her hair, as well as the thorny vines that come down from her groin area, middle area. But yeah, the dangly viney bits will also have a layer of this applied. So I'll go ahead and apply this and catch you guys back here in just a tick. Right, so next up is the first stage of highlighting the honeycomb areas, and for this I'm just taking some Uriel yellow, and again with my oval type dry brush here, I'm just applying a dry brush over the honeycomb, focusing more on the sort of the centre portion and the more raised up dome area, and then just lightly feathering it off towards the outer edges. And the idea is to build this up to get a nice bright yellow in the centre, and then that darker more ochre colour towards the outer edges. So obviously with this dry brushing here, being careful not to go over any of the bark areas, which isn't too difficult because obviously I am focusing it on the centre portion of these, but still being careful. Okay, so with that first layer of highlight dry brushed on, I'm now taking some Flash Gits yellow, and using the exact same method, I'm going to apply this yet again over the honeycomb, but focusing even closer to the centre and not coming out quite as far, so that obviously we get a nice graduation from the sort of that ochre outer edge, the Uriel yellow, and then into this Flash Gits yellow. But once again, just applying that over all of the honeycomb areas, and also the same technique for this is applied to the midsection that joins the torso to the legs. So we'll be back in just a moment. Right, so next up it's time to apply some colour to the body and the other areas that we painted white previously. And for this I'm just taking some Ethermatic Blue contrast paint. I think that it's a brilliant contrast paint for giving that sort of ethereal blue glow effect, and it works great over a white coat. I will apply this a couple of times, 2 or 3 times, obviously letting it sink into those recesses to darken those up, and then with the later two coats I'll apply those two areas where I want a little bit more shadow, so sort of just under her armpits, under her breasts, and sort of in the recesses of the dagger a little bit more. And then the same with her face, I'll put a couple of coats on there. I also go ahead and apply this to the couple of swirl engravings that she's got on her legs. I did apply some white to those earlier in the same way that I applied the white to the body and the daggers. I just forgot to mention it at the time, so apologies for that. But I did apply the white in there so that this would have a bit of a blue glow within the wooden swirls. Okay, so next up I'm taking some Nurgling green, and I'm going to apply this slightly thinned down over the tips of the branches, so over that Lauren green, and this is again just to pale off. So I'm going for sort of a summery summer transition towards autumn kind of look with the wood, so a nice dark wood with this this sort of paler green coming off, and then the slightly more vibrant green leaves. So basically this is to pale up that transition from that brown to this pale green on the end of the branches. So again, I'll apply this over sort of the top third of each of these branches coming off, and the same with the vines between her legs, and later on as well with her hair. And then just sort of, like I say, it's thinned down, so I'm just making sure that it blends nicely in with the underlying paint. So I'll get on with this and catch you guys back in just a second. Okay, so for the edge highlighting on the honeycomb areas, I'm using some Phalanx yellow and one of my new brushes. I'll do a little bit of a video on these brushes at a later date, but this is a number 1 size, I believe it is, and all I'm doing is just applying a thin line to the bottom edge of each of the holes within the honeycomb pieces, just to give a highlight. Now what I'll do is, as I work my way to the top where it meets its peak of the curve, I'll then flip the model around, so rotate it 180, and I'll do the same so that the highlights are on the bottom edges of the back side as well, and not essentially the top edges. So I don't follow this all the way up and over going round, it's on the bottom edges of both the back and the front, working my way up to that centre line on the top. So as you can see here, I've just turned it and now I'm just picking off the bottom edge, and I do this on all the holes over all of the honeycomb areas, just as a final highlight. So I'll get on with this and we'll be back in just a bit. Right, now for the final highlight on the branches here, I'm just using some Ogrine camo, or Ogrine camo, not quite sure how you pronounce that, but some Ogrine camo, and I'm applying this over the leaves and just slightly onto the branches there, and basically this will be a highlight for the vines, again just working from the tips and then ever so slightly up into the lighter areas. You don't want to overdo it with this, as it is quite a pale green, and it will stand out a little bit towards the you know, in comparison to the other colours. So yeah, just a little bit over the top is good enough. Right, so now I'm just highlighting all of the bark areas with some thinned down Rakarth flesh. This is just so it doesn't stand out too stark against the Dryad bark, but I did decide that I wanted a bit more of a vibrant highlight throughout this piece, as the bark just seemed a little bit too flat. So yeah, basically every, or almost every, hard edge and raised point over this model, to which there is a lot, got a touch of the Rakarth flesh. So I won't bore you with watching me go and pick every little detail on this model out, so we'll just jump on ahead to the next step. Right, so now I'm just taking some Warpstone Glow and just applying this over all of the leaves on the ends of all these little branches here. So being sure to pick off all of them and being careful not to go down onto the branch at all. Once I've done this, I'll then go back in with the some moot green and just carefully edge highlight a bunch of these leaves, not in any particular order. I didn't want edge highlight on all of them, so I just went around and picked a few off. Okay, so now I'm just going to finalise all of the green sort of branch areas by applying a layer or a wash of Athonian Camo Shade. This is just to sort of tie in all of the highlights and different values in with each other. So obviously that's all over the hair, and although I'm picking off the leaves here, I do then go back in and wash that down over the branches themselves, just to give everything sort of an even contrast over the top of everything. So obviously I go straight up the vines on between her legs as well, applying that all over, and then allowing that to dry. I will be back in just a tick. Alright, so now I'm just going to take some Runefang Steel and just apply this over the little bits of jewellery that she has hanging off her hair, as well as the sort of the little hand symbol that hangs just off of the right arm. And I went for this so that I could then apply a thin layer of Aethermatic Blue over the top, and that would give it a sort of a metallic blue, you know, a blue steel kind of look to it. You'll also notice on the claws that with the Rakarth flesh, I gave that a layering, or a few layers, multiple layers of the Rakarth flesh thinned down, to build up a grade from Rakarth flesh right at the points, going back towards that Dryad bark, giving the impression of sort of wood to bone claws or something, just to break those claws up from the rest of the model a little bit, and just add a little bit more colour in there. You'll also notice with this model, guys, that I haven't applied any of the bugs. She gets some beetle type things on her left arm, as well as some single ones that you can place around the model. This is because I was unsure as to which I wanted, and I have now decided that I want to go for the bugs, but I want to paint them with some of the new colour shift paints from Green Stuff World. If you haven't seen those, I'll post a link down in the description so you can go and check them out. But I am looking to order some so that I can get some colour shift onto those beetles, just to make that stand out a little bit. They're way too small to really get a decent colour in with highlights and everything else. But I feel that the colour shift paints would be brilliant for that. So for now, I've left them off, and then I'll be adding them on once I'm done, which you can check out if you go and follow my Instagram I've got a link for that down in the description. Then once the finished model goes up there with the beetles, then you'll be able to check that out as well. Right, and there we have it, guys. There is the finished model. First of all, I would like to thank you all for joining me and following through on today's video. I hope that the quality of the video is improving a little bit. I am trying, as well as obviously trying to improve the quality of my painting. You can see there that I've gone ahead and finished or painted up the base. All that's left now is for the black trim, which you will see in the photo that was at the beginning of the video, as well as on my Instagram. But yeah, the base is essentially some sand and a couple of blue slate chips with some small tiny gravel placed on, obviously painted over, and then some sprinkling of flock and static grass with some grass tufts over the top there. So yeah, once again guys, thank you so much for joining me. It is a pleasure painting this model, and even more enjoyably so knowing that you guys are watching my videos. So if you did enjoy it, hit that thumbs up button. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscription button, ding that little bell so that you can get those notifications of when new videos go live every Monday for Mortal Realms Mondays, and every Wednesday or Thursday for Indomitus, depending on personal schedules for getting the models painted up in time. So that brings us to the end of today's video. Until next time guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.